Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Badou versus Noel Mikaelian rematch. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and subscribe if you're new, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content and I will try my best to get out there for you guys. And I really do appreciate all the support in which I've had with it so far. It's been, far better than I ever expected, and so again, thank you very much. And of course the link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one though. And this is a rematch in which I feel like is definitely warranted, but I'm not too sure how basically both of these guys. Badou has been able to basically have this belt shared with Mikaelian for as long as they have. For the past 2 years, they've basically been able to avoid the challenge of any elite name in the division, fighting only themselves and Makabu for the belt, and have been able to do pretty much whatever they've wanted with the title. Things got a bit confusing with this belt, with Mikaelian being made champion in recess, then Badou being given the title after, not fighting for it for a while, and then Badou fought Makabu, who just lost to Mikaelian. I'm pretty sure that's how it all worked. And then there was a 2 year basically gap from both of these fighters where neither of them fought anybody, where there was a few, possible rumours of what could have happened. There was a time in which we almost saw Jake Paul versus Badou, and like I say, it was weird. There wasn't really much going on. I know contenders like Ryan Rizicki, who got himself in a good mandatory position, he was getting frustrated with things. He was the interim champion at one point. He was getting frustrated because the WBC belt was just being held up for 2 years. And like I say, have been able to pretty much just do whatever they want. I think it has become obvious to all boxing fans that if either of these two guys face a Zerla Ramirez or a Jair Pataya, that they would probably most likely lose. It is impressive that at the age and at the inactivity levels that Badou has had in recent times, that he is still able to win close fights and beat contenders. If that's what you can call Mikaelian, even though he is on the older side himself at 35, after he has had, of course, a lot of fights at the top kind of level of the cruiserweight / well, mainly super middleweight division. But I feel like whenever he does lose, a retirement could be lingering for Badou. And like I say, if he is to lose in this fight, again, it could be a good send-off to him to go on to retire, because I just feel like he's not going to get another opportunity to fight for a world title. I don't think the cruiserweight division is that strong at the moment, and he probably could go on to possibly win this fight and to possibly win against some of the other contenders who are around, because like I say, there isn't really that strong level of contenders at the moment. But when you look at the likes of the other champions, if either of them two guys are ever able to pick up this WBC belt, or a David Benavidez coming up is able to pick up this WBC belt, you would think that it would be difficult, very difficult, for an aged 42, currently, year-old Badou, who's only, of course, going to get older, to have an opportunity to fight for this if he does lose in this fight. Unless it's another close fight and somehow a trilogy gets ordered. But it does kind of look like at the moment he is in a position where each fight in which he's getting in is ending with close decisions and is just kind of getting tougher for him. Of course, the Mikaelian fight was quite a controversial decision. That's why they're making the rematch. And like I said, I think it's fair that they are making the rematch for Mikaelian. But he also fought Makabu, and Mikaelian was able to beat Makabu in just 3 rounds via stoppage, whereas Makabu went 12 rounds with Badou before Badou was able to stop him. And Makabu's never really been a great level guy. And to be fair, Badou, any time in which he has taken a pretty big step up, has struggled and has had close fights. He had close fights with Groves, De Gale, Rivera, Pascal, Dirrell, just to name a few guys in which he's had close fights with. He's never really been able to be that guy who wins really convincingly, but again, just in the more recent fights from what I've seen, it has seemed to take a little bit more out of him, and he has seemed to struggle a little bit more, kind of going through the gears a little bit more and actually being able to really set himself aside, because he is a skilled fighter and you've got to give him that. But again, it's just the age, I do feel like, is kind of gradually catching up to him. But still, like I say, he can compete with this level of guys, which is still impressive, like I say, at 42 years old. I mean, he's joint at the moment with being the oldest current world champion, with Erislandy Lara, who of course defended his belt last weekend. And to be fair, I don't know who exactly is older by months, but like I say, in age, they're both 42. So I suppose they're battling it out to see who will be the kind of last one standing in the old champs. But Mikaelian, he did prove in that first fight that he can deal and stand with and compete with a champion, which of course I wasn't sure before. I thought he was going to lose that first fight, but he did impress me with some of his skills. He did look that out of his depth, and he looked quite solid for the most part. Obviously, he did beat Makabu in an earlier stoppage than Jack, and that was impressive and most likely the best win of his career. Before that, he'd only ever really fought Briedis to a decision, which he lost, and has been, obviously he's been a cruiserweight for longer and hasn't fought the same kind of level of opposition as Badou Jack, but he's still, like I say, in a good spot here. I think he's definitely going to be coming into this fight in a good spot, in the way of, he could be coming into this fight possibly the favourite, just because of what we saw from Badou Jack in that first fight, because he of course is just getting older. And if this fight was possibly 5-10 years ago, then it could have been a very different fight. And of course, obviously now Mikaelian does seem to be catching Badou Jack in a good spot. But of course, he's lost to him once already, so obviously it was a close fight where you could say that was a controversial loss, but it could possibly happen again. And if Mikaelian does become champion, again, I really do want to see him get out of his Don King contract, because I think obviously he's had plenty of issues with contractual issues and making fights. Obviously, that's what I've kind of touched upon already with having this time off. He, again struggled to, there was only real talks to ever fight Badou Jack, but that fight, like I say, took 2 years to be made. The likes of Ryan Rizicki and the other guys have just had to wait around. And the promoters as well, who drew with Ryan Rizicki, have just had to wait around because of the fact that the belt has been just kind of holding up the division, and you do have to kind of look at Don King and their way that they were going about things to kind of blame him a little bit. So I do kind of hope that Mikaelian, this is his last fight with Don King. Obviously, he's been able to get the opportunities to fight the likes of Badou Jack and to fight, the first fight was on a Saudi undercard, and this is a main event. But again, I think if we want to see an active champion, or at least we want to see a champion who is even going on to try and challenge the other champions, then we need to see the division moved on a little bit more. And I'm never really too sure if that's ever going to be the case with the likes of a Don King, getting involved with the contracts, because again, we've seen it countless times with fighters where they've struggled to get contracts over the line and fights made due to Don King getting involved, especially recently. But nonetheless, like I say, we will have to wait and see if that does happen. But in the way of, both fighters individually, skill set wise, Badou Jack as a fighter, what we kind of learnt, especially from that last fight, I mean, I feel like for both fighters, we can only really go off that last fight because of the inactivity in which they've both been having. So mainly from that last fight, we can say that Badou Jack has solid fundamentals. I think that was on display from both fighters, to be fair, in this fight. He still uses some movement, but he is, slowed down a bit, and into the later part of that fight, he was using less and less movement. He's got a high, tight guard. He comes in bigger with the right hand, and that was the shot in which was having bits of success for him against Mikaelian. He doesn't leave many openings. I think Mikaelian does leave a bit more gaps and openings in his game and in his guard. He improves throughout the fight, and I think that was, maybe he was slowing down a bit, but his actual placement of punches and his timing was actually getting better. in that first fight than the later the fight went, and he was able to shorten up his punches well in close, and he was able to fight in the clinch well. And Mikaelian was at times boxing well and putting together combinations, but any time in which the fight got in close, and mainly whenever Mikaelian finished a combination, the fight would then get in close, and then Badou was always knowing how to land clean after Mikaelian had thrown a couple, and then he was landing that one clean shot, and it was having more of effect because it was the stronger shot out of the two. So it was obvious that the judges were more so going towards that more powerful shot, in which was at the end of a combination for Badou than the kind of 3 or 4 that Mikaelian had landed beforehand. Again, you can agree with that if you want, but that was kind of evidence as how it looked, and of course that is a very much veteran move. Again, that's something in which you can see a lot of fighters use when they are on the later side of their career. They don't want to use too much energy, so they just want to allow the younger fighter who's more fresher to throw a bit more, and then just land with the kind of shot at the end to make the opponent kind of maybe, if they are getting comfortable landing shots and trying to get into their rhythm, to then disrupt that rhythm and then land, like I say, a good shot of their own and catch their opponents off guard. And I think, to be fair, even though he isn't the more natural cruiserweight, I think he's physically more comfortable in that kind of close physical contest in that of Mikaelian, and he was able to put Mikaelian on the back foot quite a lot in that first fight. Negatives about him, I think at the mid-range he did struggle to get his punches through a bit. His jab was coming through here and there, and it was catching Mikaelian at certain points, but it wasn't coming through as nicely as what it could have done. He wasn't really committing to a tremendous amount of actual hard punches. The short shots that he was occasionally landing were good, but they aren't real footing shots, and he's never really been a massive knockout artist, to be fair. And again, that's another reason why I feel like a lot of his fights have been really close, because he does start at quite a slow output and it never really goes up too much. Again, he's always kind of just doing enough to be able to nick rounds here and there, but he's never really convincingly winning rounds. And again, that can also link in with the fact that he's not landing crazily hard punches either. He's not as fluid with his combinations. He doesn't follow up on his attacks that he does land enough. If he's to land that kind of one singular shot afterwards, and then if he's to pair it up with another couple shots, then that could really, have an effect on his opponent. Because I do think he is actually more powerful than Mikaelian, or at least can do a bit more damage than Mikaelian was trying to at least do in that first fight. But he just wasn't doing it enough. I think I saw him do it once, where he followed up after landing the short shot. I think it was the short right. He then followed up and did it again, and that had success and landed again on Mikaelian, and that was nice. But again, I would have just liked to have seen him follow up on his attacks a bit more. And maybe he will in this second fight. He doesn't take much of a backward step. He seems quite tense when he's throwing. He's not cutting off the ring that well. He was allowing Mikaelian to kind of circle off and move around well, which Mikaelian was doing well, and he wasn't just sitting on the ropes, and that was nice to see, but he wasn't trying to cut off the ring at all, Badou. He's not doing enough to clearly win rounds, like I said. He doesn't have that sharp reactions. He's trying to be the pressure fighter, and he was a bit later on in the fight, but he was also, trying to be the pressure fighter on the front foot who could then, take a shot and then respond back with a better shot and counter. And there was a couple of times in which he tried to do that, and he wasn't sharp enough with that counter to be able to do that. Again, that's probably just coming with his age as well. Mikaelian, as a fighter, he, in that first fight, was pairing up the jab really well, and at times he was even pairing it up 2-3 times and then twisting his jab to then come in and kind of create a new angle with it and come round a bit more, and then be able to land a couple more times with that. Again, they're not the most powerful, but they're nice. Again, point scoring shots. He changed his levels continuously in that first fight, which again was impressive. His combinations seemed fluid, they seemed natural, changing levels from body to head pretty sweetly, to be fair. He's not got bad movement either. He was stepping off to the side and circling back round quite a lot, which was impressive. Again, kind of coming from different angles, different positions, which was something, of course, that Badou wasn't really doing. He's got solid reactions. Again, they're not anything too crazy, and there was a couple of times in which he did miss when he was trying to go for counters, but his reactions were sharper, and there was a couple of times in which he did land when he reacted and countered with a body shot. And I think the counters, I would like to see him actually get off and try and utilise uh, a bit more in this second fight, because I think he could definitely land, especially later on in the fight when Badou Jack's like movement is slowing a bit more. He is able to get his longer levers through better. I think his jab was getting through better, even though again it wasn't the most powerful, but it was getting through better than that of Jack, with the size of Mikaelian being that bit bigger. He mixes in his combinations well. He was outworking Badou Jack in my opinion, and of course I think he does have very solid fundamentals as well. And again, it surprised me. It was impressive, and again, it wasn't what I was expecting, just from, like I say, what I've seen from Mikaelian in the past, and the lack of kind of high level experience in which we had seen from Mikaelian. And that was kind of giving me some doubts in that first fight as to if he really had too much of a chance. But again, he kind of proved me wrong and shows that he does have a chance against a Badou Jack. Negatives about him, I think he doesn't really commit to that many kind of bigger shots. Maybe he could have gotten away with doing that a bit more, because I didn't think Badou Jack was a major threat to really, catch Mikaelian out, even if he put himself in a bad position. But again, he wasn't committing to that many large shots. He's not really got much head movement. He was more open to being caught at a jab. There was a couple of times in which he was being caught at a jab because of the lack of head movement. He doesn't really gain his opponent's respect, even though he was kind of out throwing and outlanding him. He still wasn't gaining the respect of Badou Jack, and Badou Jack was still able to land better, like I say, more eye-catching shots in them kind of closer exchanges. His jab not really having much of an effect in that first fight, and he was getting overly comfortable, I think, and he was leaving himself open when he was throwing, which again, he would kind of lean in after his combination was finished, and then again, that's when he would get caught by the short shot of Badou Jack, and that's when, of course, Badou Jack was winning rounds and having success off of that, because Mikaelian was just getting far too comfortable. But if he doesn't start to switch off like that, which he was doing quite often in the fight later on, if he doesn't start to get into that habit and he does keep his movement going and he keeps his hands that little bit higher, then he could, like I say, put on a real actual good boxing kind of masterclass in this fight, where, yes, I don't think he's going to be able to go out there and get a massive knockout, but he can box and move, and he can look good doing it, but he just needs to make sure that he's not just switching off, coming in close and just getting caught with unnecessary silly shots, which, like I say, he was in that first fight. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Noel Mikaelian is going to be able to win in this rematch. He's going to be able to win via a unanimous decision and get the best win of his career, the biggest name of his career. And again, I've just kind of touched upon what I want to see him do: box and move, keep that jab going, mixing the combinations well together, but again, don't be just recklessly coming in a little bit and getting too comfortable coming in and getting caught with the silly shots. And then, like I said, I feel like he definitely can go on to win this fight. I think a Badou Jack is definitely beatable. And again, I think a Mikaelian is going to be able to do it, but not stop him, like I've touched upon. And then we can go on to fight next. I mean, it's going to be really interesting what happens with the Cruiserweight division. I mean, Optaya should be fighting Zoda Ramirez next, and if I was, David Benavidez, I would then, if he is still planning on moving up and he has to move up, because I don't blame him for wanting to move up, because the light heavyweight division is a bit stagnant with Bivol and Beterbiev kind of waiting to fight again. So if I was Benavidez, I would move up and challenge the winner of this fight instead of challenging Zeda Ramirez. Obviously, it's not as big of a fight, but it's a way to pick up a world title. Let Optaya challenge Zeda Ramirez and then go from there. So, I mean, in an ideal world, that would be what would happen. But if Zerda does go on to fight Benavidez next, then Optaya has to come on to fight the winner of this fight, because it has to be a unification next for Optaya. If for some reason that doesn't happen and the WBC kind of get involved and do their thing, then Michael Seslak is current WBC interim champion. He beat Jean Pascal earlier this year with a nice stoppage, to be fair, and he's made a bit of a re-rise after his loss to Lawrence Okoli. So again, perhaps that could be a fight that's there. If not, Ryan Rizicki, of course, like I've touched upon, has been waiting for a long time for a title shot. But at the same time, he is just coming off a draw himself against Peralta, who is an Argentinian fighter who's also there. So I'm not too sure if that would really be that exciting of a fight either. And I mean, I think Badou Jack was actually set to fight Rizicki before Rizicki pulled out of that fight the first time, which was meant to be on that undercard of Canelo versus Skull. And then, of course, Mikaelian came in instead. So maybe Rizicki is still in there in line and he's just waiting, because, of course, he's not really tried to make the rematch with Peralta, so that might be what is happening again. I'm not too sure. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.